So, hey guys, today we're once again talking about cards that don't exist. So, let's assume I was a card designer in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, what type of archetype or what kind of monsters or effects would I add into the game at this point in time? So, I'm sure we've all kind of thought about this, just kind of custom card territory, I guess. So, right now, what I am most interested in is a monster with a kind of continuous effect. So, um, I'm thinking something in terms in the terms of like Kali Yuga's effect. So we have Kali Yuga's almost kind of unique effect. I don't think anything else really works like this. After this card is XYZ summoned, for the rest of this turn, other cards and their effects cannot be activated on the field, and other card effects on the field are negated. So this effect right here, we can ignore the rest, is actually kind of interesting because this activates specifically, well, this is kind of a card effect that activates when Kali Yuga is summoned, right? But the thing here is, this actually does not start a chain. So I was thinking about, could we do like an archetype or boss monster where we have effects that just simply don't start chains and they're just things you have to play around? So, for example, with Kali Yuga, this effect is kind of brutal, but mostly because it's a lingering floodgate, honestly. Aside from that, it's not like bad. If we just consider like the trigger conditions and summon condition for Kali Yuga, I mean, the summoning of Kali Yuga is going to be insanely telegraphed because it requires you to use 2 level 8 DD monsters. So if it's really telegraphed, I guess you can stop the summoning through various means. Like, let's say we have to shuffle guys into the graveyard. You try banishing those with like an IP into SP, banish the guy in the graveyard. We have ideas of things like that, or if it requires guys on field. So in this case of Kali Yuga, so in Archetype and DD, you would need 2 level 8 DD monsters, which are not the easiest things to put on the board, honestly. Well, I mean, easier with the support now, I suppose. But yeah, for the most part, this is still going to be fairly hard to do. And I mean, when you see 2 level 8 DD monsters, you should be thinking, well, assuming Kali Yuga was a problem for your deck, then you should be considering that they might be attempting to make Kali Yuga, right? Especially if they're going very out of their way to put the level 8 monsters onto the field. And therefore, it's pretty stoppable, I would argue, you know? But because of how this type of effect works, what's really interesting to me here is that if we had, like, a board with, I guess, like, Apollosa, Baron, Warlord Savage, you wouldn't be able to do anything about whatever this type of effect is in general, right? And I think that's very interesting that you wouldn't be able to deal with the effect per se, but you could still interact with the monsters. But I mean, it is like kind of still like flipping. I'm kind of flip flopping here a little bit, where like if this monster becomes too hard to summon, then it becomes useless because my opponent will stop its summon every single time. So that's like a thing to kind of consider. But main thing that I'm really focused on today is going to be the card effect. So I was thinking that we could have some sort of boss monster, so it wouldn't necessarily be exactly 1-for-1 or a 1-for-1 copy of like Kali Yuga. I'm thinking something like King Tiger, kind of, right? Like King Tiger Wanghu, like an effect like this. Kind of. But it applies kind of continuous to like when you would summon the monster, it would apply the effect immediately without starting a chain. So it would just be this effect, but on a monster with a Kali Yuga-like trigger, right? So I'm thinking something like monsters on the field with equal or less attack points than this monster are going to be just destroyed, period, right? So if this monster hits the field, the idea would be that, well, whenever we summon this, it would immediately more or less nuke the board. And I think there would have to be some like archetypal restrictions as well to prevent you from like half getting your opponent out of playing the game here. Like if you had some way to prevent a card from being destroyed, I don't think there should be any method to do that. I think that's something you'd have to be careful about with like this kind of card, just a little bit, I suppose. But main idea here is that it's going to be like an insanely powerful, fast kind of Raigeki. Maybe it's only going to be summonable on your turn as well. Who knows? Not 100% concrete or set in stone because the card doesn't exist, but you know. So the idea would be maybe that we could use this card as like a board breaker. We can just summon the monster. It immediately wipes out anything weaker than it, plus itself, because it has equal attack to itself, obviously, right? So whenever it gets summoned, it would immediately also leave the field. And this would be like insanely fast, right? So let's assume, well, I'm not saying it would work like this necessarily, but let's say maybe it's like a contact fusion. So like, I don't know, Spirit of Yubel type deal. Or like, yeah, just a contact fusion, or not Spirit of Yubel, Phantom of Yubel. You know, just imagine you shuffle two guys off your field, and then immediately you drop like a bomb, and then it just gets sent into the graveyard as well, and it has a good opportunity of clearing your monster's board. And technically, this could be kind of an endboard piece if you were able to summon this on like your opponent's turn, I suppose. The main thing is, I guess, it should not be able to protect itself, because then if it could protect itself, it kind of becomes like a kind of obnoxious floodgate almost. I guess the other problem is a few ruling things would be problematic now that I think about it. How would that work with like something like triggers? So if we have Moyi, well, actually, no, wait, Baguska. How does Baguska work exactly? When would the timing on this have to happen? Now that I'm thinking about it. So like with Baguska, any of your attack position cards go into defense like immediately. But this doesn't start a chain, right? No, it doesn't. So if I recall correctly, oh, that's a problem a little bit. But it's fine because it's not meant to remain on the field, right? If it were to remain on the field, it would be a problem. But because it can't, I think it's fine. Probably really be careful about designing that aspect, I guess. Because technically, if it were a continuous effect, how would that interact with like on summon effects? Think about that. It's kind of disgusting. I guess that's why it starts a chain, right? But yeah. Main thing I'd want to see, well, probably if it weren't fully a continuous effect, but it was just something that's immediately applied without starting a chain, it'd probably just be fine. So then you have less things to worry about. I guess that would make sense. That'd be a more logical way to do it. But you know, being able to like wipe your opponent's like monsters out really quick, or attempt to do so by dropping like almost a spell speed for Raigeki, I think is pretty cool. And I don't think it's like that insanely impressive because like every deck and their mother now kind of floats like an insane amount, like to the point where it's kind of disgusting. Like just for example, for if we were like let's assume this deck did exist and I did summon my monster and I did wipe out all the yummy monsters, they can still reborn one of their yummy synchros with the effect of their yummy surprise in the back row. If you were on yummy, for example, if we were playing Malice, you have GWC, I believe, to reborn a guy. You also have March Hare to more or less also reborn guys. So you still have interaction after this, anyways. And this would be pretty solid as kind of an N-word piece, maybe, and also like word breaker tech. I guess like as a going second archetype, that would be not bad for going second. And then if you want to use this as like an inward piece, it would also be not bad. I mean, it's honestly not that great as an inward piece. I mean, how would this function in a mirror even? would be kind of funky to think about, honestly. Well, I guess what would be cool, and why I would prefer the effect to be continuous, is for like one specific application. I'm thinking like if we were able to monster reborn our card. So let's assume in the archetype there's some way for me to like reborn this theoretical boss monster. Uh, so it would be reborn negated, and it would preferably have a decent-ish kind of attack line to destroy a lot of different monsters, I guess. So if we were to reborn it, I would want it reborn negated, and then I'd be able to maybe attack with it, and then during the end phase, it would, or the start of the next turn, I guess. I don't know which happens first. Not sharp enough on these rulings, but regardless, whenever its effect is no longer negated, because the assumption would be that it would be negated until like the end of the turn, it would then destroy itself, and then whatever monsters are on like my field and my opponent's field, preferably. And I think that'd be a pretty solid, pretty interesting kind of mechanic to kind of maybe mess around with. I mean, there's probably a lot you could do with this in terms of like end board or like deck playstyle or this type of effect. Would it be like really intimidating for new players? I mean, could be a problem in those regards. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's another effect like it in the game, like not the way I'm describing it at the moment. So I think at least it'd be kind of neat. And well, you design that as a boss monster and have an archetype kind of play around it, I suppose, a little bit. Like in terms of archetypes, I think if, for example, Regenesis could actually access the extra deck, I think that'd be a solid boss monster for maybe Regenesis. But like the Regenesis stat line thing doesn't really work well with that theoretical boss monster, maybe. Unless we did something like this card gains original attack based on like or it gains attack based on like monsters used as its like fusion material, and then still has that destroy effect. Maybe you could have a way to summon it negated or something. That'd be kind of potentially interesting, I guess. I mean, the play style I think would suit Regenesis, because if you were to board wipe yourself on your opponent's turn, you just add all your guys back to hand. That's about it, really. And then you'd be able to play with your Regenesis cards again on the next turn. That's literally the only synergy I would really think about here. Aside from that, it doesn't. Well, I mean, yeah, it doesn't really change a whole lot in the game. In terms of like meta, there are some things I think it wouldn't be a super good matchup for. It depends, I suppose, right? So like Mitsu would be chillin' for multiple reasons. Like you have a board wipe tied to Murakumo here. It does kind of play around potentially a purification depending on like the summoning method. Technically, you could do something like, of course, like contact fusion, XYZ summon, that type of thing. So Link 1, XYZ summon, whatever, right? Like kind of a Zodiac XYZ or Zeus type deal where you just slap it on top of a singular monster and immediately drop it like it's hot. You have those ideas, I guess. And then technically this can destroy monsters, so you can like Murakumo to Raigeki the board, and then you can, assuming this gets removed, you can still also just reborn it with prayers as well. And then there's actually technically the idea that these guys actually have protection effects, right? But all of them are destroyed at the same time, in theory, I think. So this wouldn't be able to protect, I don't think. Hmm. Now that I'm thinking about like being continuous would apply some like rolling nightmares here if it didn't start a chain, but not starting a chain is a kind of interesting like mechanic. I think you could build a whole like archetype or deck around like that type of thing. So I mean, what would the main monsters do? Like the main deck monsters? Hmm. I don't really know. I haven't really given that much thought, but yeah, I think it'd be at least a kind of sick boss monster or a tool that an archetype could use fairly effectively. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.